30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning to most of you in the Western Hemisphere who are joining me today. Good afternoon and good evening to my European and African viewers, and good very early morning to my viewers in the Pacific Rim. And welcome to the Angry Astronaut. We're going to be exploring some unknown territory today. We are going to be checking out some images from Mars Express, European Space Agency's amazingly resilient probe that's been out there for 2 decades now, providing us some amazing images of the red planet. And it looks like we're getting people who are checking in right now. Where are you watching from? Thank you so much for doing that. Producer, South Yorkshire, hello. Daytona Beach, hello. West Dorset, hello. Surrey, hello. Israel, thank you so much for checking in. Hello, Romania. Really appreciate you checking in. Thank you very much. Over 100 people watching right now. Hello, Maryland. Thank you very much for joining us. Indianapolis, Tucson, Germany. Hello. Thank you very much. And yes, this will not be thoroughly live, obviously. We have several minutes worth of time delay coming to us from these images. And ESA, of course, did say that. Massachusetts. Hello, Australia. We have 2 Australians joining us. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate that. Lightspeed abysmally slow. I suppose that's very true. Hello again. I guess it's Lancashire, UK, with this my assumption there. Really appreciate everybody checking in and watching today. This is going to be, please say again, producer. I thought you said something. Okay. Yeah, this is some interesting stuff happening today. And once again, we're venturing into unknown territory. ESA has never sent live images from Mars before. They've never sent live images from Mars Express to Earth. I have no idea what these images are going to look like. Oh, by the way, viewers really do appreciate that. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And as I say, my British viewers, I will be joining you last week of August, probably, depending on how that goes. By the way, there's a question that I wanted to ask, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put that question out now. I was curious how you guys would feel, my American viewers, that is, how you would feel about me going on tour before I leave the country. In other words, hit a few big cities, perhaps Atlanta, perhaps New York, perhaps Boston, perhaps Denver, perhaps Los Angeles, perhaps San Francisco, perhaps Seattle, perhaps Phoenix, something like that. Some of the bigger cities, and give a talk, give a lecture. The lecture may not sound all that exciting, but in any event, I've got a topic that I'd like to talk about in depth. And it'd be interesting to meet all of you. I'm curious how you would feel about that. And once again, figuring out the logistics of all of that, I really don't know. But to my American viewers, just curious how you guys would feel about me doing that. Maybe we could put a poll up there at some point during the broadcast to see how folks would feel about me touring the United States before I say my goodbyes, and get a chance to go to some of these larger cities. I could make contact with some of the chambers of commerce there. A lot of time, these chambers of commerce will rent out rooms very affordably, or sometimes even for free, that sort of thing, so that I'd have an opportunity. So anyway, just curious how you feel about that. Hello, California. Really appreciate that. Thanks again for tuning in. Round America Angry Road Trip. Yes, that's from Unhinged Space, my good friend from Unhinged Space in Australia, who put out a few videos on his channel for a while. Good information, by the way, on that channel. Definitely something to check into. Max, my favorite mission. Thanks. And like I said, my favorite orbiter actually has always been Mars Express, my favorite Mars orbiter. So that being the case, I've always been interested in what they're doing there, and some of the images that we have gotten from this thing. It was never supposed to be in operation for this long. It was originally supposed to be maintaining a watch over the Beagle, the progress of the Beagle lander and rover. That was the original concept. However, the Beagle failed, crashed, and so as a result, but this orbiter has been doing a fantastic job. American in Ukraine. Well, Mike Kinney, I hope you're staying safe in Ukraine. Anton Nim, thank you so much for your generous support. Like I say, thanks everybody for all of your generous support. I'll tell you that you guys are what keeps this channel afloat and what keeps this kind of content coming. So thank you very much for all of your super chats and everything else that may come across today as well. And please like and please subscribe. Yeah, ESA is disappointing in a number of ways, but they've also had some very successful missions in the past. They've given us our only images, for example, from the surface of Titan. That was a European Space Agency probe that provided that information, which was kind of cool. And once again, as I say, we are, yes, I will be back. Well, in terms of back in Cornwall, don't know. I just know that I'm going to be back in the UK in September, and definitely traveling around. So we'll see how all of that goes. And once again, Stephen, to answer that question, when my first visit to the United Kingdom was when I was 8 years old in 1977. And if my father had told me at that time that he had found a job there and we were going to stay there, and I was going to leave my friends behind, never see them again, and all that, at the time, I never would have looked back. I would have stayed without a single complaint. That's how much I love Britain. It's just such an amazingly beautiful country. And now we have lots of amazing things happening in the world of spaceflight, not only in Britain, obviously, but all over Europe. This is not just a relocation to Britain. This is actually a relocation to Europe to cover European spaceflight, something that nobody else is really doing, at least not on the spot. And I've gotten all of these these introductions, these invitations that I've received from European companies everywhere. Awesome stuff, and I can't take advantage of them if I don't live there. And I can still do my coverage of everything that's happening in the United States. I still intend to come back to the U.S. for Starship launches. I still intend to go back to Cape Canaveral for launches there as well. Certainly can't cover all of them, but I never really did. So 82% saying that they want to see an Angry USA tour. Well, I'm going to take that into account. I'm very, very interested. So yeah, they definitely, ESA has been a disappointment in terms of not embracing reusable rockets as early as they could have. Ariane 6 should have made some adjustments in the huge amount of time that Ariane 6 has been in development. It would have been nice if they had just changed the design to encompass reusability, because that's going to create a problem for ESA in the future. The fact that the Ariane 6 is such an incredibly expensive rocket compared to everything else out there. It's going to require a lot of it's been pushed back more times than New Glenn. It's true. It's been a ridiculously frustrating rocket, and it's one of the reasons why I like to see all of this new privatized space flight emerging in Europe, because there's definitely a desire on the part of companies in Germany, in Spain, in Britain, etc., to give us some new solutions to give us an alternative to Arianespace. So in any event, but in terms of their scientific accomplishments, it's impressive. By the way, the images that we hopefully will be seeing today will be partially provided by the Goonhilly Earth Station in Cornwall. For those of you watching, those of you British viewers, you'll be interested to know that, and for those of you who've watched my Goonhilly coverage, you probably know this, that the Mars Express transmissions have been handled by Goonhilly, a big transmitter in Goonhilly, for quite some time. So all of the imagery that we receive from Mars Express is being received, and of course there's transmissions to Mars Express, all being handled by Goonhilly Earth Station. And for those of you who don't know what Goonhilly is, it's a huge a privately owned communications station in Cornwall. That was started by this fellow who had very humble beginnings, and now has built that into quite an amazing communications hub, communications nerve center for Europe, that's utilized by a wide variety of companies, including SpaceX. SpaceX has one of their most critical Starlink nerve centers at the Goonhilly station. They, of course, wouldn't tell me that they have that there, but they do indeed have that there. So that's a good big part of what SpaceX does in Europe is also handled by Goonhilly. So big stuff indeed going on. So over 120 people watching. We are less than 20 minutes away from ESA going live on this. I don't even know how they're going to be handling the commentary. I mean, one would assume that they're going to be talking about what they're showing us. I'll allow them, of course, to handle their commentary, and you guys, of course, get a chance to listen to that. If there are some gaps or there are any comments that I can put in on what we are looking at, I'm pretty familiar with Mars and the different regions of Mars, and if there's any additional details that I can interject, I will, of course, be happy to do that. Mars is one of the most amazing places in the solar system for a wide variety of reasons. And we have really only scratched the surface of what's to see on Mars. We haven't put a single rover into the most interesting places on Mars. We haven't had the guts to put those rovers into those difficult terrain areas. It's for good reason, I suppose. But Perseverance definitely had the capability to set down in the Valles Marineris or someplace in that vicinity, and they didn't, which is unfortunate. And because it would have been nice to see Perseverance set down there, and also the new ESA rover. There's some discussion of it setting down there, but honestly, I don't know if they're going to take the risk of it setting down in difficult terrain like that as well. Although we certainly have the capabilities. When we're over 11 minutes when we receive live. So we are at, okay, Wicked, thank you very much for that clarification. So right now, the light travel time between Mars and Earth is about 11 minutes. That time, of course, varies widely depending on where the red planet is in relation to us. It can be as little as 4 minutes or so, and sometimes it can be a lot more. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, what else do we have? Any other questions coming in? But feel free, by the way. Yeah, there are some amazing things to see, and you're right that the Hellas Basin that you're talking about, it is indeed a very low sitting place on Mars, and because it is so low, it also has a denser atmosphere. It has warmer temperatures, even though Mars' atmosphere is ridiculously thin. Altitude makes a substantial difference. The thicker the atmosphere, the warmer the temperatures, and the better the radiation protection. Regardless of how thin the atmosphere is, actually, the surface of Mars, many regions of Mars, are no more dangerous radiation wise than on the International Space Station. There really isn't a very big difference in terms of radiation danger on the Martian surface versus the ISS, in spite of a lot of, I think, exaggerated claims about how dangerous the radiation is on Mars. And there are certainly some regions of Mars that are very dangerous radiation wise. But if you compare the majority of the surface of Mars with interplanetary space, it is a huge difference, and that is simply because of the atmosphere. How fast would the wind of Mars have to get a high wave hairstyle? It would take a lot. The atmosphere on Mars is so thin. It's such a the air is so thin that even a very strong wind blowing at 100 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour, that sort of thing, it's not even going to be something you're going to be able to feel to any significant extent, because there's just not enough density in the atmosphere to when the wind is blowing against you that you're even really going to be able to notice it. Therefore, dust storms, as far as wind speeds are concerned, are not dangerous at all on Mars. What is dangerous is the electrostatically charged dust in the midst of powerful Martian dust storms. Those create a lot of electrostatic charge, and therefore lightning, something similar to lightning anyway, the types of lightning that we see in dust storms here on the deserts of our own planet. So you can get a lot of electrostatic danger in those kinds of dust storms, therefore representing a threat to equipment, to rovers, to spacesuits, all of that sort of thing. Also, the electrostatic charge on dust means it can adhere to face plates, visors, that sort of thing, equipment, etc. So it makes a bit of a problem. Alun, thank you so much. I'm glad that you got to check out the Cornwall space plane, the space engine systems. That they are establishing a very solid relationship with Spaceport Cornwall, because Spaceport Cornwall is really desperately looking for another horizontal launch provider, whereas the United States, a lot of the spaceports in the United States are not quite as interested in a new emerging space plane. Whereas Britain would really love to have one there. So it's created a unique opportunity for this Canadian country to get established in Britain, and to start doing some of their flights there. So yeah, maybe use it to produce electricity. That's an interesting idea there, Matt. To see if we could perhaps harness some of the electrical energy in those dust storms. Yeah, that would be nice if we could take advantage of it. But it is going to represent a problem. There have been a number of papers that have been written on it, and it's something that we're going to have to build into our equipment, build into our spacesuits, built into our rovers, that sort of thing, to prepare for what is likely to be a bit of a wild day or a wild few months, depending on how huge the any given dust storm is. And yeah, it will present a threat to visitors, but not the kind of threat that we saw in The Martian. That was something I noticed immediately and was very disappointed in during the movie, that there is this violent dust storm threatening to blow the lander over, and that's something that just wouldn't have happened. There are many other things about dust storms that it would have made them dangerous, but not that. Okay, Spaceport Cornwall interested in expanding to vertical launch in the future. They are not, Collect Panda. They are a horizontal spaceport. There are vertical launch facilities in Britain. The biggest of these, of course, is Saxavord in Shetland. They have a number of launch providers that are looking to launch out of there. American launch providers, two of those, and also a couple of British, a couple German. So a wide variety of different launch providers looking to launch out of Saxavord. It's looking to be a very busy vertical spaceport. Then there's the Sutherland Spaceport, also in Scotland, that's going to be exclusively used by Orbex, a combined Scottish, Danish rocket endeavor. So that's going to be coming up as well. Future vid for journalists in the UK. Tim Marshall, a new book talking about the geopolitics of future in space. That sounds interesting, Stephen. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for mentioning that. I'll make sure to make a note of that, so we can definitely see it. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things developing in Europe that definitely needs to be covered. Certainly not as exciting as what's happening in America. I'll acknowledge that, but at the same time, America is being covered by everybody. Every YouTuber is covering what's happening here, and I will cover this stuff here as well. But rather than jumping into the pit with all these other folks, I think I'd like to report on some things that everybody else isn't doing. And like I said, during my trip to Britain, I really built a lot of professional relationships that I would like to take advantage of. I think there's a lot of unique content that I can bring the viewers from Europe that I simply can't bring them otherwise, especially now my connections with the UK Space Agency. They have been really, really helpful. And I've done 4 interviews through the UKSA now. They have connections with all kinds of other companies in Europe, plus the European Space Agency, etc. So super exciting stuff. Supporting vertical launch. If Barry, if I understand your question correctly, Pegasus is just an expensive solution. One of the reasons why it wasn't all that successful is 3 times as expensive as Virgin Orbit was. Horizontal launch has a number of advantages. A horizontal launch spaceport is way easier to build. For one thing, it is super easy to build a horizontal facility, and you can build it at just about any airport with minimal modifications, as Cornwall proved. I mean, it only cost them 20 million, 30 million pounds, something like that, to put in everything that they did, including the satellite integration facilities. That's amazing. You can't do that with a vertical launch facility. So if all you need to do is launch small payloads, and there are many, many satellite manufacturers in Europe who would like to do that, and they don't want to send their payloads across the Atlantic, then it offers some flexibility. It offers an opportunity. Now, once again, does it cover all scenarios? No, but many. And also, of course, the rapid reaction scenario. If a military satellite is lost, a critical military satellite, either as a result of a malfunction or perhaps a future enemy action of some kind, horizontal launch provides the ability to quickly redeploy another satellite on demand a lot more easily than you can do it with vertical launch. Now, once again, I mean, does that replace vertical launch in most scenarios? No, absolutely not. Vertical launch still remains the solution for most things, but I do believe that horizontal launch is a good solution. An alternative solution. And really, I like to embrace all different types of space flight, even if especially if that type of space flight is innovative. And I think horizontal launch is an innovative way to go. Yeah, definitely. There's to bring up the fictional work. I have just been having family in town and getting ready for my son to graduate, and also preparing to move, and liquidating my property and stuff has set me behind. But definitely have a science fiction YouTube channel coming soon. Ellie in Space, providing me with the female. Audio on that. Obviously, she'll be the voice actress, for the female characters and all that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Got some interesting stuff to bring you there. So looking forward to that. Yes, Andy, you're right. Horizontal launch allows deployment from anywhere, giving direct access to LEO that the customer wants. That's true. I mean, there are many customers who need a certain orbit. And you can, and there are other things too. For example, if you have bad weather or high winds at your vertical launch facility, it just means you have to scrub the launch. Whereas if it's horizontal launch, you can fly your plane someplace else where the weather is better, where you have clear skies, etc., and launch from there. So, there are, or if you have some knucklehead who puts his sailboat into the exclusion zone or something, as sometimes happens at Boca Chica, with horizontal launch, you just fly your plane to a different location and launch from there. So there are a number of advantages. Let's see here. So like I say, is it a replacement for vertical launch? Absolutely not. Vertical launch is the solution most of the time, but I think that there's definitely a market for horizontal launch. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, I mean, with the demise of Virgin Orbit, that all changes. Mr. Charles, thank you so much. Really appreciate your support. Really appreciate everybody's support today for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe. And as always, your super chats are very much valued right now. It's just the reality of the way things go. I posted on Twitter an article that was put out recently about how the monetization on YouTube has been very bad for creators, especially for skippable ads for some reason, that sort of thing. If you're interested, you can just look up my Twitter account. The article's right there. But in any event, you guys' help, let's just put it that way, you guys' help makes all the difference in the world. And I am super, super grateful for that. And that was the first super chat, by the way, from Mr. Charles ever. Thank you so much. And yeah, Sierra Space, I've had some conversations with them recently and some amazing stuff coming from them. I'm going to be going to Colorado soon, by the way, to pay a visit to their facilities. Again, I'm just going to go see my dad while I'm at it, and I'm going to pay a visit again to Sierra Space to get an update on everything they're doing with Dream Chaser Tenacity, and also with their upcoming space station modules that they're going to be deploying now that they've completed their testing, their pressure testing on the Life module. Mr. Charles, thank you so much. That was a really nice thing to say. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's see, Wicked making another case. Let's do this. Just climb above the weather. Yes. Yep. And volcanic ash, you're right. That's a good point. If Iceland were to ever have a serious volcanic eruption, that, of course, would disrupt the hell out of anything that they try to do in Cornwall. Serious volcanic eruptions in Iceland have caused all kinds of past disruption to European aviation. And at some point in the future, there's going to be another eruption in Iceland that's going to really cause a lot of trouble again. That's just the nature of how all this thing works. David, thank you so much. Really appreciate your support. Horizontal launch, a little more tolerant of poor weather. Yep, that's very true. Super nice of you. Put towards a tour. Absolutely, I will. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate that. Iceland is a serious eruption. Yeah, well, I've been there twice now, and it is one of the most amazing places to visit. And if you ask anybody who lives there, they'll tell you that there's an important difference between visiting Iceland and living in Iceland. It is a difficult country to live in. Violent winds, violent weather, and of course, volcanoes everywhere. And it can be disconcerting to live there unless you've lived there all your life and you're used to volcanoes. As the Icelandic people are. They're tough people indeed. David, once again, thank you so much for your support today, and thanks everybody for your support. We are about to go live from the European Space Agency and Mars Express. Once again, I don't know what to expect here. I don't know what kind of images we're going to see, but ostensibly, these are the images that Mars Express took just a few minutes ago, 11 minutes ago, just the light travel time between Mars and ourselves. Here shortly, we're going to be seeing these images being beamed to us. I assume there's probably going to be an introduction coming from ESA, but we're going to be transitioning over to that here very soon. So in any event, I'm not the one who controls it. Our producer is. But we're going to be coming across here real soon. Should be very interesting stuff. Mars Express, my favorite orbiter ever. Favorite Mars orbiter, and should be some interesting stuff indeed coming to us today from the European Space Agency. Bear with me here. We're waiting for this transition to happen. Once again, I can't say for certain as to when this is taking place. Let me go have a look here real quick. Okay, ESA has still not, I just received information. ESA has still not gone live. They will be going live very soon, but not just yet. And we'll get some commentary. We're just transitioning now. Enjoy the pictures, guys, and I'll be making some comments here and there when I get an opportunity to. Here comes Mars.
To
Is there
Earth,
any audio
and then to YouTube,
producer?
and then to your eyes in about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
We know you've been waiting for a while. We're very happy with how many people have joined. I'm Rosa. To introduce myself, I'll be moderating today, and you have live audio commentary to let you know about what's happening on screen in front of you. So this is, to everyone who's just joining now, welcome to Mars Live from ESA, the European Space Agency. Again, we're about 5 minutes away from the first live image arriving at Earth. And these images are being sent down by Mars Express, our spacecraft in orbit around the red planet. And actually, Mars Express turns 20 today. So this is why we're doing this live. It's to celebrate Mars Express's 20th birthday. The mission that was only planned to last 2 years. As a little disclaimer, the images are coming from the visual monitoring camera, also known as the VMC. It's a low-quality camera, originally developed in the late 90s purely for engineering purposes. So for that reason, don't expect too much in terms of the quality. It's got the nickname Mars Webcam for a reason. So I'll introduce you to the two experts who are in the room with me today, and they'll be answering any questions you have if you put them in the chat. I have Simon Wood with me. Maybe, Simon, you could introduce yourself.
Yep, hi, I'm Simon. I'm a spacecraft operations engineer on the Mars Express flight control team. So I'm one of the people whose day job it is to actually operate the spacecraft and ensure it's working correctly and taking all of the great science observations that it's been doing over the years. I'm also particularly responsible for the VMC camera as well, so we've been sort of heavily involved in that over the years. As Rosa was saying, I mean, it has been nicknamed the Mars Webcam for a reason. It's very much the type of camera that you would have walked into your local, I guess, PC World if you were in the UK, or Saturn if you're in Germany. I don't know, maybe Jorge could tell me what the equivalent is in Spain, but in the early 2000s, and because it was there for one reason and one reason only. It was there to take images of the Beagle 2 lander that Mars Express carried to Mars, specifically such that we could see that it was deployed correctly. And in principle, once those images were taken, it was going to be turned off, and there was no plan to turn it back on again. The flight control team, a few years later, decided to have an attempt at recommissioning it, or at least seeing if it still worked. And I think to everyone's surprise, it did. And so for quite a few years now, we've been using it to take shots of the red planet from typically from high altitude, and placing them on social media and on Twitter.
And I just want to say we're 2 minutes away now from the first picture, and in case you're wondering, the graphic that you're seeing moving across the screen many times is what we expect to see over the full hour. So as each picture comes in, Mars will move from the top right of the screen to the bottom left of the screen. So the first image you will see will only have a tiny little bit of Mars in the top right-hand corner, and because it's the first image, it will be extremely overexposed. So the quality will get better after the second picture. And I'll pass over to Jorge, who is a true expert when it comes to the Mars webcam, and he could introduce himself and a little bit more about what's happening, and expect the first image in about a minute.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jorge Hernández Bernal. I am one of the people in the science team of VMC. It's in the last 5 years, more or less, we have been working to make from VMC not just an engineering instrument, but we have been recommissioning it to be a science camera with a lot of work in engineering and in science as well. I am one of the persons who have been working on the science of the instrument, and I am also one of the persons who operate the visual monitoring camera in the day-to-day, and also one of the persons who work on the data processing of the camera to make it available to the world. And in the last, we are very close to have the first image. Actually, we have been working a lot in the last few months to make a specific software, because we usually we don't retrieve science data in real time, so we needed really to change our operational software to make sure.
So it looks like we're over 16 and a half minutes worth of travel time for the signal.
Oh, it looks like we might have something. And just to remind you, for anyone who's just joined now, this is the first ever live stream from Mars, and it's coming from the Mars Express spacecraft. That is an ESA mission, 20 years old today, so wish Mars Express a happy birthday. And it, about 16 minutes ago, sent its first image down to
Once
Earth.
again, to clarify, guys, this image is not going to be very impressive.
You can see that as soon as humanly possible.
Ooh, that looks better than I thought.
Everyone's quite excited. As we said, the first image will be quite overexposed, and Simon and Jorge can explain a bit why that is. And the images after that should be a bit more detailed. As we've said before, this is... Ooh, here it is. This is the first image from Mars, and it's the most live you'll ever get, unless you travel to Mars, to the red planet itself. This is Mars 16 minutes ago, and Simon, maybe you can explain why we can't see what's happening right this very moment.
Well, it's actually very simple. Mars is a very long way away. As we can see on the actual stream at the moment, over 300 million kilometers. The images are traveling effectively from Mars Express to the ground station in Cebreros in Spain right now. And even though they're traveling at the speed of light, that distance is so huge. It takes 16 minutes and 44 seconds right now for those images to travel from the spacecraft back to Earth. So what you're effectively seeing right now is essentially, if you were currently sitting on board Mars Express and effectively sort of looking to your left, then this is what you would be seeing. So yeah, we typically don't normally get images in this way. The way in which Mars Express captures most of its science is what we would call store and forward. So basically, it will look at a part of the red planet. It will take pictures or use its spectrometers or its subsurface radar to collect the data. That data is then stored on board the spacecraft, and at the next opportunity that we have to talk to the Earth, because on Mars Express the actual antenna system is attached to the spacecraft. It doesn't actually move, so we have to slew the spacecraft to look at the red planet and then slew it back to point the antenna at the Earth. And so the next opportunity that we have, we transmit the data back. So the scientists could typically be waiting a couple of days potentially for some of their observations. Today we have a very unique sort of opportunity where we've got an ability to have a very specific pointing. So the spacecraft is not in its normal Earth pointing mode right now. It's sort of slightly rotated towards the planet, because that then allows us to enable VMC to see Mars whilst we can keep the antenna pointed at the Earth. And in fact, actually, the reason the stream is actually only about an hour long is because we can only really maintain this pointing for about an hour because of the way in which we have to orientate the solar arrays, and so it will start to put a load on the spacecraft's batteries if we were to stay like this for too long. Yeah, this is certainly the first time that we've ever actually been getting real science data back in real time. It's quite a rare occurrence for deep space missions.
And for anyone who's just joined, a quick reminder that this is Mars Live, and this is for Mars Express's 20th birthday from ESA, the European Space Agency. And we're looking at, I think this is still the first image, or possibly we're getting the second image in.
No, this is the number 5.
Ah, we've had 5 images. Okay. Oh, you can actually see it move a little bit. That is cool. It will get more, you'll see more of Mars soon. Maybe, Jorge, you can also say why we're only seeing a little bit of Mars at the moment.
Yeah, actually, as Simon was commenting, right now Mars Express is a very specific pointing, because the antenna is pointing to the Earth and VMC is pointing to Mars. And because of that, we are going to see how Mars is moving from the top right corner to the bottom left corner. And now it's still in the corner. We can see that in the top part of the image, it's the night. It's much darker because it's the night there. Actually, in the bottom, in the right side of the image, we have created this three-dimensional graph. So in the position of Mars Express and the planet, and we can see in this graph the night, the day, and also we can see a curve on the planet that represents the part of the planet that we are seeing. We are seeing the southern hemisphere of the planet. And actually, it's very funny because we are seeing a cloud next to Arsia Mons right now.
Can you guys see that?
It's kind of
that
hard
little
to
cloud
see
by Arsia Mons.
Left side of the image, there is kind of a white,
2/3 up the limb of the planet.
To a cloud in Arsia Mons. This is not the famous Arsia Mons elongated cloud, which, as many people know, those who follow VMC, that's a cloud that we found some years ago that expands up to almost 2,000 kilometers. In this case, this is not that very special cloud, but this is a different cloud. This is an orographic cloud in Arsia Mons. We are right now in Mars. We are approaching
it's crystallized ice crystals being blown, they think, being blown off the volcano. That's usually what causes that cloud
in Mars
from
is
Arsia
right now kind
Mons.
of a similar time of as in the year. And in Mars, because we are in the aphelion, we are in the colder season, and this is not the dusty season, not that season in which we have the dust storms, but this is the season in which we usually see a lot of clouds, mostly in tropical latitudes. Well, we are lucky because we don't always see so clearly a cloud with VMC, and in this case, Arsia Mons is very close to the border of the planet, and there is an orographic cloud there. There are other features in the image. Actually, as I told, this image is showing basically in southern hemisphere of the planet, and we don't see the South Polar Cap because the South Polar Cap is now covered by the night. But around the area, usually in this season, we can find a lot of hazes. Just they are very hazy and they are not so clear. But I think that I can see that it's a bit cloudy in the southern hemisphere.
So I see we're getting a few questions in at the moment. So one of them was actually how much time does it take Max to actually make a full orbit of the planet? And it's actually just over 7 hours. So we typically do about just over 3 orbits a day. And actually, as Jorge was mentioning, you can see part of the planet is actually in darkness because it's nighttime on the back side of the planet. And actually, what you will notice is that as the planet is moving effectively from the right to the left of the screen, so we're actually heading into the darkness, and that's actually a particular effect that happens throughout the Martian year. So Mars Express's orbit periodically takes it in a position where the planet is between the spacecraft and the sun. So that's actually where we're heading right now. So in a few hours' time, the spacecraft will be behind the planet with the reflected sun and effectively in darkness. And so at that point, its solar arrays are no longer generating any power, and it's completely reliant on its batteries to stay alive. And so this is a particular, the eclipse seasons that we have an impact on the operations of the spacecraft. And on the science as well, because obviously, whilst we're eclipsed by Mars, we're completely reliant on the batteries for power. So we have to dial down the amount of power that we're consuming so that we don't hit the batteries too hard. So we have to turn off some of the science instruments, or we can't run them for as long, or we have to take measures to to keep the spacecraft warm, because obviously not only once it goes behind Mars and it's no longer in sunlight, not only do we lose power, the spacecraft is also getting very cold. So we take steps to try to reduce the overall power consumption by doing things such as, once this stream finishes, a lot of the heaters on board Mars Express will then switch on and go on to full power to try to basically warm the spacecraft up as much as they can, such that when we approach the eclipse entry point and then we lose power from the arrays, those heaters will then go off. The spacecraft will cool down, but it will be cooling down from a much higher temperature, so that the heaters don't need to come on whilst we're in eclipse and we don't have power from the arrays. And so when we come back out the other side, the spacecraft will be cold, the heaters will come back on, it will warm up, but we won't be using the batteries to run the heaters. And that's, in a spacecraft that's this old, I think our batteries are lithium-ion batteries, so it's very similar to the sorts of things you'd have in your mobile phone. And I think everybody's got used to now the fact that after a number of years, your mobile phone charges very quickly, and it also runs out of battery very quickly. And so, lithium-ion batteries do age over time. And so, when on a mobile phone, you can either go and get a new battery, or you go and get a new phone. On a spacecraft, it doesn't quite work like that. So we have to do everything we can to look after them. And so, we've been doing these various measures to ensure that we don't discharge them too much, and that we keep them topped up at most of the time. And so we found, basically by keeping them colder and not discharging them more than about 40%, that they've actually survived much, much longer than we ever thought they would. And in fact, actually, even some of the battery experts who've analysed our telemetry are quite amazed at actually how well they've held up. So I think
the images are improving. We're definitely
if you really want your
seeing
mobile phone battery to last a long time, then don't discharge it more than 40% and keep it in the fridge at all times.
You heard it here first. We're actually about to be joined by one of the Mars scientists that works at ESA, so we can tell you a bit more about what's happening at Mars. Has there ever been life on Mars? Could there ever be life on Mars, or water? But for anyone who's just joining, again, this is the first ever live stream coming direct
And
from
to clarify,
Mars.
guys, we're getting this
It's
off of
taking
what
about
they call
16
the
minutes
webcam
light
for
signals to
ESEM,
get to us.
which isn't as
And
good
we're
as
getting
some of the
this
other
footage
cameras that
from
they
ESA's
have, but
Mars
this is the only way to
Express
deliver
mission,
these
whose birthday
images
is
to us
today.
right now.
And it's coming
But
from
the resolution should
visual
improve
monitoring
the more
camera
images
on board
that we
Mars
get.
Express. And actually, we have Colin here, who perhaps can introduce himself and maybe could talk about some of the other cameras on board Mars Express, as well as this one, and your personal connection, I think, to the VMC and its views.
Great. Hello. Yes, my name's Colin Wilson. We are here celebrating the 20th anniversary of the launch of Mars Express. So 20 years ago today it was launched. In fact, the exact anniversary will be in 1 hour 45 from now.
Oh, and also to clarify, there
so
was a
we're
question
preparing a
asked,
toast
why
for the
isn't
occasion.
it upgradable? It
It's
actually
special for me
is.
because I did
They
my,
send
my
software
PhD. I
upgrades
built a
to
bit of
Mars
equipment,
Express on a
which went
regular
up on the Mars
basis.
Express
The
rockets.
problem
It
is it's
was part
tough
of the
to
weather
upgrade
station,
the equipment.
on the Beagle 2 lander, which went up with Mars Express. So that launched
But
on the 2nd
software
of June,
gets
then
upgraded
arrived
pretty
at
regularly.
Mars, in December, on Christmas Day, 25th of December, 2003. Unfortunately, it was not successful in landing and then communicating back to the Earth.
Thank you, Plastic Pinocchio.
But we
Appreciate
all knew
the
it was a
12
high-risk
quid.
mission, but it was
Thank
certainly
you
a
so
very,
much.
emotional time for us all watching and waiting to see whether that survived. But that was Beagle 2, the lander, and of course Mars Express, the orbiter, has had a tremendously successful 2 decades of exploration of Mars. But I don't want to just talk about myself. What are all the questions which people have been sending in about this stream?
Well, some people are asking about life on Mars, water on Mars, and we had a specific question about one of the clouds on Mars. What's it made of and what is it? And I think this is in relation to what Jorge was telling us earlier about the huge elongated cloud that looked a bit like a volcano was erupting, but I think it wasn't.
So I think really the experts about the clouds, especially around the volcanoes, are the science team behind this VMC, this camera, of which Jorge is probably really the leading expert. So I'll hand back to him in a minute. But in general, if you want to ask about water on Mars, really the Mars Express spacecraft was put together to investigate water in all its forms. So from subsurface water and ices, looking for that. And Mars Express, one of its first results was demonstrating that there is indeed water ice in the polar caps of Mars. And not only can it see there's water ice in the polar caps of Mars, but it detected strong radar echoes from the subsurface. And then strong radar echoes from the base of the polar cap, which suggests there might be liquid water underneath those polar caps. Now, this is still controversial. The interpretation is not simple. It might be liquid water mixed with ice, a bit like a slush, but that's certainly very exciting. But so Mars Express has been investigating water there. It's been investigating the history of water on the surface, so these valleys carved by rushing water torrents, rocks which must have formed in the presence of water, so hydrated minerals and clays. And then up in the atmosphere, the atmospheric water cycles, the clouds as demonstrated, and then even the escape of water to space. So the questions are, what are light spots and white spots? And really for this, I have to turn back to Jorge, who's the expert in these clouds.
Well, actually, just a couple of minutes ago, as Mars is moving our field of view, a new clear cloud has appeared. This is a cloud that it actually looks like a bright spot in the right field of the image right now. And actually, this is a high altitude cloud. Probably this cloud is something around 50 or 60 kilometers over the surface, and it's projecting a shadow. If you look carefully to the image, you can see right on the top right side of this bright spot, which is a high altitude cloud. There is a dark feature, and this is the shadow of the cloud. Here it's the morning. We are very close to the southern pole, so actually this is kind of a like This is like on the Earth when you are in very high latitudes. You can have the days around the southern around the solstices, in which the sun doesn't set or the sun never rises. And here we are in a similar region. We are very close to the polar night, and close to this part, it's right now. It's the morning, and there is where we see this cloud. Actually, with EMC, we have been working a lot on high altitude clouds in the twilights, like in the morning, in the very early morning, and also in the afternoon, right after the sunset. And well, this is an amazing example of this kind of cloud, and I'm very happy that we are seeing so many interesting features in this image, mostly because they are features that they are kind of easy to appreciate. Apart from that, they were asking about the points, the other points, the other features in the image. Also, close to the night, a bit on the top of the feature, of the bright feature that I told that is a cloud, there is a white area, more or less. It looks a bit like if it was a milky area, and that's the polar cap. And in the border of the polar cap, there is something like there is a bit more darker, a bit more brighter in some parts. That's one of the craters. I will need to check which one is this, but this is one of the craters. The southern hemisphere of Mars is covered by a full of craters. And well, there are other things in the image. Basically, there are a lot of features because a lot of topographic features in specific, and there are also some hazes around. But like we have basically two very clear clouds, which are very opaque clouds, and they are very bright. And then we have a lot of topographic features and a lot of hazes that are around, but they are not so easy to spot.
One of the questions we've had a lot is about why we can't see any stars, and also if we could possibly see Mars's moons. So over to Colin.
Okay, so the question about stars is completely fair. The answer is simply that Mars is very,
Again,
very
a lot
bright.
of you guys are
So
pretty
you
familiar,
can,
I think,
you
as to
can
why
see
you can't
Mars
see stars.
from the Earth.
To
You can see
RC
the
Amons,
planets
that
appear,
cloud,
if you look
RC
in the
Amons
evening
is
sky
very
tonight when the sun
unique
sets, the
in
first thing
having
you'll
that
see
white
as
cloud
the
that
sky
forms
gets darker,
around it
the
and
first thing you'll
sometimes
see,
becomes
other than perhaps
elongated.
trees and planes and
It
things,
is very
Venus.
strange
Venus
that
is a
it's
very
that
bright planet,
one
but
volcano
to the left
that has
of
that
Venus, you will
feature,
also
that
see
atmospheric
Mars.
feature,
It's bright,
compared to the rest of
from
them
Earth,
that don't form the
if you're
same
very
kind
close
of
to
clouds
it,
that
it is
often.
even brighter.
RC
And so
Amons
it's
is
so
a
much
big
brighter than the
mystery
background stars
as to
that,
why
that's
those
why
clouds
they do
form
not
there.
appear in this image. But if you were in space where this camera is, you would be able to see stars when you turn away from Mars. And that is, in fact, critical to how Mars Express navigates. And many of our spacecraft navigate by having star cameras. And they have on board, they have star maps. And so they, like mariners of old, they navigate using the stars. And that's how they know which way they're facing. So if you were where the spacecraft is, then you would see stars. There was another question about how we know these are clouds. So here's Jorge again to tell us.
No, but first I wanted to comment on the stars, because with EMC, actually, for calibrations, we have sometimes spotted both Phobos and both the stars, but for that we use very high exposures, and we point to a very different position where Mars is not present. Otherwise, Mars will be so bright that we will not be able to see anything.
So we often can see the moons of Mars from Mars Express. Mars Express, as you can see on the right hand of your image, it's got quite an elliptical orbit. So the big ellipse you see shows how far from Mars sometimes Mars Express gets. And right now this ellipse shows it's got an apocenter. It's furthest from Mars when it's high over the southern hemisphere. But that does vary. So sometimes we're high over the equatorial latitudes, and when that happens, we pass really close to Phobos, which is the bigger moon of Mars. So sometimes we pass as close as 50 kilometers from Phobos, which is very, very close. And so then we get very good images indeed. And so Mars Express has been critical for building up images of that moon. So this is quite exciting because coming up in a few years, we've got a very ambitious mission, which is the Japanese-led Mars Moon Exploration mission. So ESA has a small part of that. we will be collaborating with them. But that is not only going to image the moons in detail, it's going to orbit Phobos, and then it's going to land on Phobos briefly. It's going to touch down on the surface, grab a sample of the moon, and take off again. And then bring that sample, which it's grabbed from the surface, it's going to bring that back to Earth. And that's very exciting. So
I think we can see some craters now in the middle of the image.
Jorge, do you want to say something about
those of you taking a look? We're getting better resolution on these images all the time.
Yes, I think some people would like to know about this graphic on the bottom right that we've been showing, and that was one that you made. Maybe you can explain a bit about it.
Yes, basically, as part of the LEAP observation, we wanted to allow people to really understand a bit what we are seeing. So when we made this graph in a way that we can see that Mars Express is, as Colin was telling, in the apocenter of the orbit or close to the apocenter. And in this graph, basically, we see the planet, and for the map of the planet, we choose a topographic map of the planet, because this way we can really see what are the
features, to answer your question,
that we have there.
Mars was lush way before the dinosaurs. We're talking
the part of the planet that we can see in the image is the one. Basically, there is a circle that says around Mars, and then there are two lines that go from the border of Mars to Mars Express. Those lines are showing us which are the limits of the part of Mars that we can see. And then the circle that is around Mars, it is also allowing us to see which are the part of the planet that we can see. And what we see is the southern hemisphere. And well, basically we wanted to make this kind of graph to try to help in a understanding of what are we seeing here, which is basically the southern hemisphere. But for example, now in a moment, okay, now we have seen the Tarsis Vulcanus in our site. Let's wait a bit for another rotation. Like there it is, Tarsis Vulcanus. So we see that the limit of the part that we can see is in the volcano of the middle, and we can see the volcano of the south. The volcano of the south is Arsia Mons, and we can see in the three-dimensional graph that this is part of the area that we can see, and indeed in the leaf image we can see this volcano like a brown spot, a dark spot in the left part of the image, and then as I told before, we have right now a small cloud right in the bottom of this volcano. This cloud is growing to the west, which is kind of the common thing in the season. In the season in Mars, we see a lot of orographic clouds in the volcanoes of Tarsis, and here we have a very good example. But well, basically,
okay. Stop talking about the clouds. We've got drama. We've got high drama here, because you may be noticing that the image is not changing, and so this image was acquired at 1805, and then if you add this travel light time, this image will have reached Earth at 21 minutes past the hour. But that is some time ago. So what has happened? We're just hearing from the people in the spacecraft wizards who are driving it. There is apparently bad weather around the receiving station, which is corrupting the reception of the signal. So this is where I would like to hear more about exactly which is going on. Which ground station are we using for the reception of this signal?
Cebreros.
So we're using the Cebreros station, which is near Madrid. It's just west of Madrid. My colleagues in Madrid, because we have Science Operations Center for Mars Express in Madrid, tell me that after months of dry weather, it's been raining in Cebreros. And so apparently bad weather at Cebreros is
such irony.
So
you would think that the problems would exist at Mars as to why we couldn't receive these signals, and instead it's Earth weather that's messing things up.
So what's the latest on that?
I would just say, if people are interested, the ESA's S-Track ground station network has 3 very beautiful 35-meter antennas, and you can go onto the website. if you're missing a live view because ours has currently frozen, you can actually get a live view of the deep space antennas. Yay! And you'll see in Spain some miserable clouds over our antenna. And breaking news that telemetry is actually back. So we might have to wait a bit to get the next image. But keep your questions coming in. Again, this is the first ever Mars Live. It's coming to you from Mars Express, ESA's 20-year-old mission orbiting the red planet. Colin.
So what we've just heard is we are now receiving signal again at the station. So you may be thinking, why are we not yet seeing an image? So this is now not the light time from Mars we're waiting for. We are now waiting for the reception, the latency between computer systems on Earth. But it is apparently working, and we're expecting the next signal to pop up on your screen anytime now. But it just does illustrate that we are using the spacecraft in a different way than we're normally used to.
Maybe Simon, maybe you could.
Do you want to say something about
we have Simon, who's been running around trying to figure out what's happening, and lots of people are asking about this in the chat. Simon, what's happened, and when can we expect the next live image?
Okay. So what we actually believe is going on at the moment is actually down to the weather. Unfortunately, alas, not the weather on Mars, but the weather in Spain is causing some intermittent problems with receiving the signal. This is not completely out of the ordinary. This does happen from time to time, and it's part of the daily life of operating spacecraft in and around the solar system. Right now, we have actually, as I say, we're starting to receive telemetry again. It is a little bit intermittent, so hopefully we will be able to get a few more images in. Because there are effectively two different data streams coming from the spacecraft. There is effectively what we call the telemetry stream, so that's telling us what the spacecraft is doing, things like its temperatures, its battery voltages, what its reaction wheels are doing, where it's pointing, its various modes. And then there's a second stream, which is the science data. And so, as we say, it is a little bit intermittent at the moment. Hopefully we will be able to get some complete images in. We'll just sort of have to wait and see.
So in the meantime, we can try to answer some more questions online. So lots of great questions in there. One is from Ramona Virus. Why does the orbiter have an elliptical orbit and not a circular orbit? Is this on purpose? This is on purpose. There are many reasons for which you might want a low circular orbit, like if you have a radar orbiter or a camera, it's always useful to be close to the surface. But the thing is, it takes a lot more fuel to get into a low circular orbit. When you're arriving from deep space, you can imagine as you approach the planet, you accelerate as you get pulled in by its gravity, and you get closer and closer. And you have to make sure that you're not going to hit the planet, that you swing by it. So you accelerate as you get closer to the planet, and you swing by and you decelerate as you go off into space. So what happens at that point, if you want to go into orbit, is you have to use your rockets or some other way of decelerating and go slower and slower. And so what Mars Express did, for example, is it used its main rocket engine to slow down. And at that point, it then gets captured by the Martian gravity well, as you will, and then it enters this highly elliptical orbit as we have it here. And that is where Mars Express is, and that's why it's in an elliptical orbit. To go to a low circular orbit would have taken a lot more fuel. Simon Wood again, Spacecraft Operations Wizard.
Yeah. Well, actually, the elliptical orbit's also there really for part of the science mission as well, because what the original kind of concept or the idea was that you would do your science when you're very close to the planet, and then you would have the period when you're further away to be able to communicate with the Earth. But actually, the orbit that Mars Express is in has been very, very carefully designed, because orbits aren't inherently, they're not static. They do move around, and so what you see is that Mars Express's orbit rotates throughout the Martian year, both what we would call sort of in plane, so basically sort of the point at which is closest to the planet constantly changes, and also it rotates sort of effectively with the planet as well. So you have a situation whereby you're the longitude and latitude of your closest approach is constantly changing, because both the planet's rotating underneath you as you're orbiting it 3 times a day, and also because the plane of the orbit is turning, you're constantly getting different latitudes as well, which allows you to get this global coverage over the whole planet.
And that's a point, we get this on Earth as well. Some satellites operate close to Earth, some satellites operate far from Earth. And when you have satellites far from Earth are great, for example, for weather maps, whereas satellites close to Earth are better for comms, communications, and spy satellites and things where you want high-resolution imagery. And so this orbit from Mars Express really does both. It gives you the faraway distant views, and as well as the close-up views. And when it's far from the planet, it can do things like fly close by Phobos, which is quite far from the planet. And it can also study the ionosphere and the solar wind interaction.
Just to get, there's been a discussion about the magnetic field. The magnetic field on Mars is indeed a regional thing, and things that have been recently discovered, the aurora on Mars, and but it does fly in the face of what we thought we knew, what we thought we understood about Mars. We thought it had no magnetic field whatsoever, and it does have regional magnetic fields, and therefore aurora that go with them.
And things on Earth, but also the weather has been getting in the way a little bit of our live stream. But we're expecting a new image anytime now. But we've actually been joined by a new guest, Daniela.
We are hoping for a new image here.
Working at DLR. And maybe, Daniela, you could introduce yourself and say a bit about Mars Express and your special camera that you have.
Yes, hello everybody. This is Daniela. I'm working at the German Space Center in Berlin. I'm part of the HRSC camera team, so the stereo camera on board of Mars Express. I'm doing observation planning. I'm happy to do this. It makes a lot of fun. So I can decide which images we observe from Mars, for which purposes. And I'm struggling with ESA and all the other instruments to get those images down. And I know Mars very well. I'm working on this mission since 2005. It's almost the entire 20 years now. And I became part of this dear Mars family.
We had a question from Jacqueline Rosales, who's invited young students to watch. So hello to all of her.
So on this most recent image, since we're going to get something kid-friendly here, as they're saying, you can see this kind of string of craters as it's been described to us recently. What looks like craters, but they are actually volcanoes. These are, of course, enormous volcanoes. And also the cloud that was talked about originally from Arcia Mons. Looks like we're losing an image completely now. Yeah.
So there are a lot of,
and once again, this appears to be from local weather problems that have been creating these issues.
Data processing, basically get some data from.
Yeah, that looks ugly.
They have other systems and they see a lot of other things. And they filter.
But given the images that Mars Express can actually create, that can be resolved into these amazing graphics that we see from ESA, you can really get big improvements. All right, so now Mars has moved a lot across our field of vision during that downtime.
Seconds probably, but basically what we have here is that because we have bad weather, we lost some packets. I will speak about this in a moment. And because of that, the program was not able to solve the real image, and it basically put, here we have a good one. I think that it's going better. Actually, Simon was telling me that the weather is going better. Basically, in the case of PMC, we have 76 packets. These packets are the kind of the way in which engineers put the information in a way that the scientists can really access to the data. And with these 76 packets, each packet includes
Yeah, unfortunately, the weather hit pretty much right at the time that we would have been able to see Mars in the middle of our perspective, to where it would have been the middle of the view. Bad luck.
The BMC image from those packets. Now, because in the case of BMC, it was not designed to be a science camera. So there is a lot of processing to be able to obtain beautiful images like this. And this involves a lot of things. One of the things is the thing of the color. It's very common to ask what is the real color of Mars. And in fact, in these images, they don't show the same colors as we would see with our eyes. Actually, color is a very complex topic related to the way in our eyes work. But basically, in the case of BMC, the color is more or less with the same system as with mobile phones. So they have something called Bayer pattern, which is that each pixel has different colors, and then we make color images from that. But it's not like it's not the idea.
Yeah, I agree, TSO. It is neat to be able to see these things. I mean, this is what Mars looked like 16 minutes ago. This is the view from Mars Express, a 20-year-old orbiter, still giving us these images. Pretty amazing.
They get actually away from the antenna that I will not understand, and they help us with that, of course.
But actually, I mean, for Daniela, it's even more complicated with your camera because you don't just have a flat image. You actually take pictures in 3D.
Yeah, we do not take them in 3D. We take them in 9 different channels, 4 color channels and 5 panchromatic channels. And we use basically 4 of those 5 panchromatic channels, which are taken at different viewing angles to produce a digital elevation model. The principle is just as how we do this with our eyes. So we have 2 eyes at 2 different positions, and we
thank you,
look
Crunch.
at the world with
Thank
2 different viewing angles, and our brain creates a 3-dimensional image of this. And we do pretty much the same, just a little more sophisticated. And so we get our 3-dimensional images. So, but this is a long way of image processing, and the raw images are, of course, they look like a photograph. But very long photograph. We don't take our images like a framing camera, so at one shot you get the entire area. What we do is we have a scanner.
We're starting to lose our image of Mars. By the way, guys, I would like to point out that you are seeing an image of Mars that would be impossible to see from Earth, regardless of how good your telescope is, because obviously we don't see the limb of Mars. We don't see part of it in darkness, part of it in light, because of our positioning between ourselves and the sun and any planets that orbit further out. The only way that we see a crescent planet is if it's Venus or if it's Mercury, something between ourselves and the sun, but something that's further out, we never get to see it like this. So this is sort of a unique way of seeing it as well.
If you imagine a 10-watt light bulb or something like this, that is about how much power we are sending from Mars. So it's phenomenal to think that you can observe something consuming as much energy as a light bulb from 300 million kilometers away. So that's how much is broadcast, and then by the time it's 300 million kilometers away, we are sensitive. I think I saw a plot today of zettawatts, which is a millionth of a thousandth of a watt. It's a tiny amount, and that's just a testament to how sensitive the receivers are in these very big dishes. So that's the power question. Just jumping randomly between these questions, there was a question about the cost of the mission. So this is something we get quite a lot. Mars Express was built for, I think the project cost was 150 million euros. In fact, that's not correct because it's 150 million écus, the European currency unit, which is a precursor of a euro. Again, a reminder of how long ago it was that this was agreed and built. So if you just think the number 150 million sounds like a lot, but that is like 50 euro cents per person in Europe. So what can you buy for 50 euro cents? you may be thinking of a candy bar, and now you can think also of a Mars spacecraft. So if everyone contributes 50 euro cents,
so we're starting to Mars is creeping its way
I
out
have a
of
question that's
Mars
kind of
Express,
related
or
to
at
the
least
value,
the
but why does it
webcam
matter that
on
we
Mars
understand
Express
about Mars?
that's
We
perspective.
had some questions
It has to be
asking about if we're
pointed in
talking
a
about
certain
Mars weather
direction
or
in
Earth
order for
weather
us to
that's
be able
getting
to
in the way
receive the
of the
signal.
signals. But how does
And I'm
Mars
sorry, I'm
help
talking
us
at
on
this
Earth?
point when
Does
they're
it help
asking
us, or is
questions
it just
like,
kind
why
of
do we need to go to Mars and stuff
escapism,
like that?
interesting? What's the point?
I think all of us are well
So
aware
there
of
are
those
lots
reasons.
of different reasons. There are lots of different answers to this question.
Yeah,
and
we're
different
starting
answers work for different
to
people.
lose it, but it's
Some
amazing
people
the
like to
amount that
explore
we've been
Mars
able to see,
because
and
it's there. It's
unfortunate
like the answer
that
about
we
Everest.
couldn't see Mars
It's
when
the
it
human
would have been
spirit
not
to wonder what is on the
occupying almost the
frontiers.
entire view, and that was because of bad weather in Spain, apparently.
Future place to live or explore. I think in the short term, don't sell your house because it's not. It's very difficult. We can't breathe there. But the European Space Agency, like many space agencies, does intend to send people there on exploratory missions. If you are not
Yes.
at all by the exploratory
To answer the
instinct
question,
of
Mars Express has a thermal
you can
camera.
also think that a lot of space exploration is useful for Earth. We have weather satellites observing Earth. We have communication satellites. We have GPS steering our vehicles. And the money spent on planetary exploration is at least an order of magnitude, at least 10 times less than what is spent on Earth orbiting satellites, which are used in our daily lives. And the planetary exploration does help develop technologies which are for our benefit on Earth. Daniela, did you want to add something?
Yeah, there's one neat thing about Mars I wanna add to the list of reasons why we do this all. The thing is that Mars and Earth are almost the same age, and they experience the same conditions in our solar system at the same time. But on Earth, everything, all the surfaces are relatively young because we have plate tectonics that eat the surface and renew it again. We have a lot of weather and erosion that vanishes all the traces of the earlier terrestrial history. But on Mars, you have, so to say, a picture of our solar system.
And by the way,
this
lady from Berlin, the DLR, the German Space Agency, is responsible for a lot of the 3D imaging that they create out of the images that we get, the raw images that we get out of Mars Express. The DLR does a lot to kind of create these 3D maps of Mars based on these images. They do some amazing stuff. I've actually used a lot of the images that they build for my videos.
Exploration. And this is a really neat thing.
They've said no audio, but maybe keep going. Sorry.
I'm almost done. I can add, as a geologist, the other advantages of Mars. It's pretty easy relatively easy to reach compared to other planets. Try to fly to Mercury and you will understand what I mean. But the geologic processes that occurred on Mars are relatively similar to those that occur on Earth. So we have tectonism, we have volcanism, we have the action of wind, we have the action of water. We had the action of water on Mars, actually, but we can see when this water has been there, how much water has been there. We can deduce
hello back to you, Hong Kong.
Climatic conditions 3.7 billion years ago and see whether Mars might have been habitable in this time. And the interesting thing is that we found out that Mars was indeed habitable at 3.6 billion years ago at certain places. And this is exactly the same time when life, first microbial life, occurred on Earth. And isn't that a question? Isn't that interesting? And now we move on.
That's an interesting speculation that she just brought up, by the way. The fact that Mars was a very habitable place billions of years ago was roughly the same time that microbial life got started here. And so was that life
I am really excited about studying Mars.
carried by meteors or whatever from Mars to here, and so therefore did life in our solar system, or at least the inner solar system, originate on Mars and not here.
As a climatologist,
and then
I think that studying Mars and studying
amino acids,
are
cells, etc., were transferred from Mars when it was a more habitable place.
We can
set down here at about the time when things started becoming more habitable, and that's when life arose here on Earth, is when Mars was at its most habitable. Is that a coincidence, or is that something that happened because our planets are more closely related in terms of the evolution of life than we think? We are indeed the Martians, says Trispire. Yeah. That's very possible. And it's another reason, by the way, to believe that if we do find any microbial life on Mars, that we could theoretically be susceptible to it if it's a disease of some kind, because it's possible that life on Mars is more closely related to us than we think. So, that being the case, we just need to be very cautious with it.
And I would like to say save the pale blue dot. This is one of the things that we could say when we look back to the Earth from space. Because saving the pale blue dot, saving the core of the Earth, is not really saving the Earth. The Earth is really resistant. It's about saving ourselves. And this is what we need to think. We need to really act more for this. And this is what I can say as a climatologist.
I just wanted to say that we've got about 7 minutes left now, and Mars is gradually disappearing off of the screen, as people will be noticing. And a few people have asked kind of where it's going and why it's disappearing. So I think it's maybe worth touching on that, just so to get back to what's being shown, and then carry on again with this conversation, which is so interesting. But yes, Mars is gradually disappearing off screen. Why, and can we see it again?
It's disappearing off screen simply because Mars Express is moving past it. So it's currently heading effectively, as we said earlier on, behind it. You can see the elliptical orbit that we're in, and it's as a result of this, it's moving out of the field of view of the camera. We will see it again because it would, if we were to keep this live stream going for another 7 or 8 hours, it would come back round again. So we just had a question in terms of whether it's possible to recover the images that were not shown due to bad weather. In principle, yes. It is something that we do have to do from time to time because, as I said,
I love the blob. What an awesome
data
movie!
Outages due to weather or issues with the spacecraft or issues with the ground segment, and it's typically involved with if it was just a problem with getting the data actually to the Mission Control Center here in Darmstadt, and it was actually received at the ground station, then actually it would be quite easy because we can actually connect. It's all recorded at the ground station, and we can simply re-request it. To actually get the data back from the spacecraft, we'll have to send a series of commands to it to tell it to copy the data that it's recorded to a different part of its onboard memory, and then we could redump that later.
And are you going to?
That would depend a little bit because we've actually to do this live stream, and because actually the data downlink on Mars Express is often extremely sought after by the instrument team. So they're producing science and they want their data down on Earth, and so we have to very carefully schedule all of the data dumps to make sure that we get everything down.
Yeah, that's true.
Nothing's left on board, because at the end of the day, if we can't get it back to Earth, there's no point recording it. And so actually for this live stream to work, we've actually had to turn off an hour's worth of data dumps, including some from HRSC. I'm sorry, Daniela. But rest assured, our mission planning team are actually working in the other room at the moment, because they were actually putting commands up that will go up next week that will actually then dump the data that would have come down in this pass were we not doing the stream.
So in case you missed the introduction earlier, we are talking to you live from the European Space Operations Center, and this is the control room. This is where they send control commands to the spacecraft and where they receive the data coming back to it. There have been some questions about the graphic on the right-hand side, people asking about whether there's an ocean on Mars. So the colors on that simply represent the elevation. So red areas are high, blue areas are low. You might immediately see that the northern hemisphere has lots of low terrains. If there was once a large ocean on Mars, then people think this would have been a sort of sea-covered, ocean. There's also a massive impact crater in the south called the Hellas Basin. We think this may have formed when a late bombardment, a late object came and smashed and made a giant impact crater. So it's quite dramatic topography. If you look closely, you can also see some high points, which are very tall volcanoes, the tallest volcanoes in the solar system. About why the image is disappearing. Again, it is an orbit, so we go
2 minutes till loss of signal.
We go round every just under 8 hours is the orbital period, and so that means that after 7 hours we will be back. By now, Mars Express has completed 24,000 orbits of Mars, so we do have confidence that it will come around again. Because it's done so many times, and not only do our equations say this, but our experience says this as well. So just again, a reminder, why are we here today? Why are we doing this? So we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the launch of Mars Express, which was at 7:45 p.m. Central European time, which is coming up in about an hour or so. But 20 years ago, and the mission was originally built and financed for a mission lifetime at Mars of 1 Mars year.
I agree, Rockin', it's neat.
It has now achieved 10 Mars years at Mars. It has now outlived its expected lifetime by a factor of 10, which is just a remarkable testament to everyone who built the mission, who designed the mission, and has operated it. And as one of the scientists who had an instrument which went up originally, this is just amazing to see, and it's wonderful to be here today. Over to you, Rosa.
We just have 1 minute left, and Mars is disappearing. But if you want to see more images like this, we actually have a less live, but still liver than most images of Mars. And that's if you go to the Mars webcam on social media. It used to be on Twitter. You can still follow at ESA Mars webcam on Twitter, but it's not updating anymore. So we have moved
now I'm
to
going to need to join Mastodon just so I can get those images.
Modern, they can go to ESA Mars webcam at mastodon.social, and the images that are currently coming down will actually go straight to Mastodon, not quite as quickly, because what we're doing now is difficult and special, and the team have spent ages preparing for this. So big thank you to them and to everyone that works on Mars Express and all the scientists. You can also go to Flickr. Slightly less modern than Mastodon, but still cool. You can get images on Flickr from Mars Express, and you can go to our website, as always, esa.int, and more news from Mission Control at ESA Operations on Twitter. We're all over the place. And our hour is up and Mars is disappearing. And thanks to everyone, to Daniela, Jorge, Colin, and Simon. And also you can have a look at the incredible HRSC mosaic image of
Thank you, Isa. All right. So it sounds like we lost the feed. I'll tell you, I'm glad I had the opportunity to check this out. I was, when they first announced that the type of camera that they were going to be using and talking about washed out images, I was really concerned that really all we were going to see was just this extremely bright disk and nothing, no surface features whatsoever. Not the case, actually. We got a chance to see some of the Tharsis region. You were able to see at least some of the features. There's also some haze on Mars today, some clouds and such. Again, very interesting to see the cloud at Arsia Mons, again, being visible, this very mysterious cloud. We think we know what it is and the ice crystals that it's composed of and such, but the fact that it happens to form there and it also takes on this strange elongated shape, that's something that we're still not that familiar with. That's something that we really don't know for sure as to why that happens. And also is interesting as always to see Mars from a perspective that we don't get to see it here, to see this crescent of Mars and most of it cloaked in night. That's something we can't see from Earth simply because we are closer to the sun than Mars is. And so we don't get to see the dark side of Mars or Mars as a crescent or anything like that from our perspective. We do get to see Venus that way, and we do get to see Mercury that way, but we don't get to see Mars or Jupiter, Saturn, any of those places. Matter of fact, any image you ever see of Saturn casting a shadow over its own rings, that is an impossible thing to see from Earth. So it's really neat to get those kinds of perspectives, unique perspectives. And the fact that this is coming from a probe that's 20 years old, the fact that, we're getting these images from such an old probe using such old equipment, software being regularly updated, but still, and to, if you haven't done a lot of this, I recommend that you do so. Check out the 3-dimensional images, such as the one we're looking at right now, that have been created by means of using Mars Express, especially the folks at the German Space Agency take those images and then use them in order to create these 3D images to give us an idea of what these places actually look like up close and personal. Really amazing things indeed. Coming from Mars Express, and have for a long time a vehicle very much like our own rovers that have outlived its mission timetable and parameters, which is very impressive indeed. So yeah, neat stuff. I'm hoping that we get more of these kinds of things from ESA as time goes on. It would be nice for them to bring on some live streaming events to attract the attention of space enthusiasts and to remind everybody of what they do for the space enthusiasts and for the space loving community around the world. It's really cool to know that there's somebody other than NASA, somebody other than SpaceX out there bringing us some amazing stuff. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe. Also, please consider joining my channel as a supporter on Patreon or hitting that little join button. Really appreciate all your support. It's what keeps this channel going. And I'll be looking forward to another live stream coming to you here in just a couple of days on Sunday. So until then, stay angry about space.